The President and Congress established NASA as part of the Department of Defense. The official reason was to prevent the Soviets from stealing U.S. technology. But some believe the real motive for this classification was not to hide information from the Soviets, but to hide it from the American public. Some researchers believe the evidence of NASA's hidden agenda can be found in the close ties between its founding scientists and secret societies.
And Horus. And they considered these gods to be truly the source of their bloodline, but also that these gods themselves came from space. At the very top, you had the Freemasons. You had James Webb, who was a director of NASA. You had a man named Kenneth Kleinknecht, who was the head of the Mercury program, the Apollo program, the Gemini program. He was a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason. Below them, you had the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, or followers of Aleister Crowley. People like Jack Parsons out at JPL were all put together, and so they all ended up under the very same roof with the very same agenda and the very same...
We should question each thing they present us with and evaluate whether or not it is true. To start, NASA was founded upon much of the work of Jack Parsons, a rocket scientist who was an open occultist follower of Aleister Crowley's Thelema religion. While having a unique spiritual perspective is no crime, Thelema is linked to very dangerous people who hold positions of power, and Crowley is revered by some people who are true enemies of humanity. Parsons has been cited as one of the most significant figures to propagate Thelema across North America. Jack Parsons is called the father of rocketry and was a founding member of NASA's early jet propulsion lab, as well as a founding vice president of Aerojet Corporation, a military-industrial complex corporation. He consulted the Israeli rocket program during Israel's first years, and was so on the side of Israeli apartheid, he was accused of being a spy for Israel by the US government. He died at the age of 37 in a suspicious explosion. L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, was close to Jack Parsons. Both Thelema and Scientology have been deep in Hollywood. Many people discovered last year that Hollywood Thelemites are connected to much deeper circles of power. L. Ron was an officer in the U.S. Navy. Another close associate of Parsons was another occultist who made significant contributions to the atomic bomb with the Manhattan
aspects of Parsons' private life that most at NASA and JPL, actually in the know, might rather be forgotten. Because one striking aspect of Parsons' private life that has been well documented outside of official governmental sources and publications is his curious association with an individual known as Aleister Crowley. Given Crowley's overwhelming and intensely controversial interests, the demonstrable importance of Crowley in Jack Parsons' private and professional life, stay tuned, and an inexplicable Crowleyan pattern that has recently emerged in all JPL missions, one feels compelled to ask at this late date, who was Aleister Crowley? And what was his heretofore unseen, but apparently highly influential role in the founding and evolution of this critical national space facility called JPL? Aleister Crowley was the premier self-styled Western magician of the 20th century, who some have called the most evil man in the world. Crowley simply termed himself the Great Beast. He wouldn't invite him to dinner. Whose secret name in his order was Phoenix, for reasons that will later become apparent. Parsons became one of Crowley's greatest students and was said to have been his personally chosen successor. Let me repeat that. We have documentation, no question, that Parsons was selected by Crowley to be his successor in these arcane, magical rituals and ceremonies and practices. This is not something you're going to get from a NASA press release, all right? Parsons quickly moved up the ranks of Crowley's organization called the Order of the Eastern Temple, and was eventually appointed head of the lodge in Pasadena by Crowley himself. Parsons swore an oath of allegiance to guide humanity into, quote, an age of communion with the gods. Is this something you're going to read in NASA's official stuff? Using his demonstrable vast talents of insight and science and, in his own words, magic. The objectives of those like Crowley who practice Western magic is ostensibly, quote, to advance humanity by contact with higher intelligence. That is, read with extraterrestrials.
Was the grandfather of today's George W. Bush. Whilst working with the Bank of America and the Jewish Warburg brothers in Wall Street, Prescott Bush helped arrange vast loans to the Third Reich.
Most important of all were the Nazi scientists. The Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA for short, was directly responsible for Operation Paperclip, a campaign to get these scientists away from the Soviets so they could work for us in the looming Cold War. However, in order to gain the upper hand, war criminals were never tried, but instead swiftly integrated into the newly formed military-industrial complex. Even some convicted criminals were hired. This raises an important question. Did the integration of Nazis into Cold War America cause an ideological contamination of government?
The U.S. government has two major programs staffed by former Nazis. Under Project Paperclip, former Nazi scientists are being sent to work at various U.S. military bases.
Next.
At the same time, in Eastern Europe, former General Reinhard Gehlen's organization is collecting fresh intelligence on the Soviet Union. His organization now employs hundreds of agents, many of them former Nazis. It survives on about $500,000 a year in Pentagon funding. Gehlen operates with little oversight.
The U.S. Army monitored this organization with two people. That's it.
Like Project Paperclip, Gehlen's spy network has war criminals on its payroll.
Well, what he promised not to do was to bring in war criminals. However, the cogs in the wheels of the Holocaust started to turn up in the Gehlen organization.
The U.S. Army isn't eager to challenge its best source for Soviet intelligence on his hiring practices.
The U.S. Army asked him, "Are you hiring war criminals?" And he said no. So it was a marriage of convenience. And a marriage, by the way, an arrangement that suited
Perhaps
Gehlen.
further evidence can be found in the inventions of the unlikely mastermind behind NASA's space program, former Nazi SS officer Werner von Braun.
Measuring 200 feet across. Its outside rim will contain living and working quarters for a crew of 50 men. Just below the radio and radar antenna is the atomic reactor. Its heat will be used to drive a turbo generator, which supplies the station with electricity. Access to the station will be through an airlock in the hub. The three large spokes are elevator shafts, and the small pipes are used as condensers for the turbo generator and the air conditioning plant. The entire wheel will slowly rotate at 3 revolutions per minute. The resulting centrifugal force will produce an artificial gravity for the men in the rim. Notice that the floors are placed so that the men stand with their heads toward the hub. The wheel is divided into 9 sections. The first section is headquarters and communications. The next section will be for Earth weather observation and prediction. Military reconnaissance experts, aided by powerful optical and radar telescopes, will observe every point on the globe as the space station makes its complete trip around the Earth every 2 hours. Next is the emergency hospital section. And then the astronomy division, where men will keep an eye on the rocket ship as it makes its trip around the moon. The rest of the space station will house calculating machines, maintenance facilities, air conditioning equipment, living quarters, and even a botanical and zoological laboratory. This entire space station will have to be prefabricated and tested on the ground. After dismantling, it will be transported in pieces
Space
up to the
scientists
orbit.
used Jewish prisoners as slaves to build gigantic underground bases and manufacture the V-2 rocket, which would terrorize Europe during 1944 and 1945. At Nordhausen and other sites in Germany and Austria, Werner von Braun and his team of Nazi SS engineers built vast laboratories and rocket factories. The interior of an entire mountain was excavated to accommodate a secret space facility which was no less than 1 million square feet. It was here, at Nordhausen, in top-secret underground bases, that a huge number of experimental rocket ships and circular flying discs were developed.
Weapon System 117L, 1956. And what it is it's a document that goes through the development of the Advanced Reconnaissance System, nicknamed Pied Piper. It's a huge satellite weapon system that involved things like later became Echelon and Project Vanguard and all the whole deep state surveillance program. This is the first document for its program called Weapon System 117L. I would like to share this with you because, as you see, the mind virus that the hackers are using, that are people who in part developed this stuff, they're very advanced. Highly advanced, and they work within the government. I mean, it was developed by Rand Corporation and Glenn L. Martin Company and Lockheed Martin. This document has all the names. Rand was doing Project Feedback. That's what they called it. All the project numbers, talked about how it's going to be 300 miles above the Earth. You can look up Project Feedback Summary Report. It was going to be doing photographic reconnaissance, intelligence, mapping intelligence, and weather intelligence. 7 years to develop. Weapon System 117L was reserved for use in ultimate system development. The designation Weapon System 117L was reserved for use in ultimate system development. Found all your names. It's all here. See, look at all those names. Project engineers. And I even got the project engineers. And this is like stuff that no one else can find. I mean, no one else did. No one in Anonymous or Cicada. No one ever gave you the weapon system name of Weapon System 117L. I mean, you can find little bits about it, but this is the entire document. Talking about nuclear reactors, solar and chemical energy sources. A single satellite vehicle would be capable of producing up to 100,000 pictures daily. These would have to be transmitted and stored and then interpreted. Do you know, how do you store 100,000 pictures a day in 1955, 57? I mean, how do you store that much photographic evidence? Back then, I mean, now we just put it on a solid state device. But back then, I mean, how would you store that much high resolution satellite imagery? It'd be crazy. That's because the development of system components required work in nearly every field of science. By 1955, sufficient data had been obtained from those in-house ARDC feasibility studies to ensure that the problems were not insurmountable. Radio Corporation of America, Glenn L. Martin Company, and Lockheed Aircraft Corporation were involved. Some more colonels and commanders. two-stage vehicles, which could be launched from United States territory. I mean, this is all like back in the 50s. The appropriate sensing equipment, visual ferret or infrared sensing, depending on objectives, would be activated, and the signals received from the sensing equipment would be stored on film, tape, or some other media. As the vehicle orbited to within the range of a ground station, this recorded data would be transmitted to the ground station, processed and transmitted to the using agencies. At the altitude of 300 nautical miles, the vehicle would circle the Earth in approximately 90 minutes. There's 9.3 for you, that's why I highlighted that one. It's circling every 90 minutes at 300 nautical miles. Just thought you'd like to know they threw that in there. This would permit a single vehicle to view the entire Earth in successive passes. In 1955. It could report data with a resolution of 100 feet. Wow. This same pioneer, utilizing different electronic equipment, would be able to furnish information on the characteristics of high-frequency electronic emissions. This latter mission was considered to be of great value since high-frequency electromagnetic radiations are not reflected to the Earth but are radiated into space and consequently cannot be monitored by normal means. The system could be improved through developmental experience. Advanced versions of the reconnaissance system would provide physiographic resolution to 20 feet or less, or more detailed information on the characteristics of electromagnetic signals. Extending to infrared radiations, targets could be located with an accuracy of 1/10 of a mile. That means they could locate anyone on planet Earth in 1955 to within 1/10 of a mile. In 1955. Finally, the ultimate system could embrace daily scrutiny of the world, including detection of long-range missiles after launch and detection of aircraft operations. The system had important basic scientific value in addition to military utility. As a result of these briefings, development of the ARS was approved. $3 million in fiscal year 57, P600 funds were made available for system development. So you see, they started officially in 1957. An initial letter contract for system development was let with the Missile Systems Division of Lockheed Aircraft Corporation on 5th of November 1956. However, P600 funds available for system development were considered inadequate, and presentations were made to General Putt and his staff at DCSD headquarters, USAF, requesting additional funds. Get more money. So with the funds available, the Division Project Office took action to initiate a contract with Massachusetts Institute of Technology on ARS guidance and control. So that's the MIT, AI lab for guidance and control, because you need artificial intelligence for guidance and control. That's what AI is used for. It guides the missiles and controls them autonomously. So MIT's AI lab was developed specifically to build this weapon system 117L. The RAND Corporation initiated studies of preliminary operational concepts for the system. Lockheed Aircraft Corporation to undertake work as the system prime contractor. Well, it's got it all. Anyway, that's the document. I'll put a link in the description. It really might be important, if you want to let people know that they've been developing an advanced weapon systems called 117L since 1950s, which they didn't ever decommission. It just got grown into different parts like Echelon, Corona, Project Vanguard. But if you have the weapon system 117L in this document, it's really easy to figure out that this is where the deep space
the United States is going to do Colonel Glenn proud. We are finally going to lead again You see what's happening. You see the rockets going up left and right. You haven't seen that for a long time. Very soon we're going to Mars. A crucial step to secure America's future in space by reviving the National Space Council after it has been dormant almost 25 years, if you can believe it. During the campaign, Vice President Pence promised that our administration, because Mike's very much into space, would revive the National Space Council. And with this executive order, we're keeping that promise. I feel very strongly about it. I felt strongly about it for a long time. I used to say, before doing what I did, I used to say, what happened? Why aren't we moving forward? Today's announcement sends a clear signal to the world that we are restoring America's proud legacy of leadership in space.
I believe that what this country set out to do was something that was going to be done sooner or later.
It was our pleasure to have participated in one great adventure. It's an adventure that took place not just in the month of July, but rather one that took place in the last decade.
This will not only make us stronger and more prosperous, but will unite us behind grand ambitions and bring us all closer together. Wouldn't that be nice? Can you believe that space is going to do that?
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
My administration is reclaiming America's heritage as the world's greatest spacefaring nation. The essence of the American character is to explore new horizons and to tame new frontiers. But our destiny beyond the Earth is not only a matter of national identity, but a matter of national security. So important for our military, so important, and people don't talk about it. When it comes to defending America, it is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space. So important. Very importantly, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the sixth branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement. We are going to have the Air Force, and we are going to have the Space
So Weapon System 117L is also Weapon System 93. Now, the other person at the same time at MIT, besides Norbert Wiener, who was a specialist in control and radar systems, was our president's uncle, John G. Trump. During World War II, Trump switched from work on hospital X-ray machines to research into similar technologies with a more direct application to warfare, especially the development of radar. During 1940, he joined the newly formed National Defense Research Committee, which is one of the research committees that was overseeing the development of Weapon System 117L. As technical aide to Carl Compton, president of MIT and the chairman of the radar division. So he was a technical aide to the president of MIT and the chairman of the radar division. After World War II, he returned to MIT to teach and direct research for 3 decades after the war. Trump died in Boston on February 21st, 1985. So he was directing research in Weapon System 117L. James Melcher, Trump's lab director, is quoted as saying, John, over a period of 3 decades, would be approached by people of all sorts because he could make a megavolt beams of ions and electrons, death rays. So that is exactly what Weapon System 117L was. It was a weapons system using satellite, photographic reconnaissance, infrared. It was detecting electromagnetic radiation, all the stuff that John G. Trump was a specialist
The
in.
Pentagon took the first steps today toward creating a space force as the sixth branch of the military. There was a speech by the vice president and a tweet from the commander-in-chief. Space force all the way. David Martin has more on this.
The time has come to establish the United States Space Force.
After that declaration by Vice President Pence, the Pentagon released a plan to set up by the end of this year a space command that would prepare to fight in space, just as other commands prepare to fight in Europe or the Pacific.
Space is one of our vital national interests, and it is becoming a contested warfighting domain, and we have got to adapt to that reality.
The U.S. military depends on some 140 satellites for everything from communications to guiding weapons to their targets. We all depend on these GPS satellites to get directions and withdraw cash from ATMs. Russia and China know that and are launching hunter-killer satellites which can maneuver close enough to an American satellite to disable it with a microwave or laser blast. 3 years ago, when 60 Minutes visited the command center for U.S. satellites, General J. Raymond described in guarded terms tracking what was originally believed to be a piece of space junk, but was probably a hunter-killer.
A young Air Force captain detected that debris started to move.
So what is that object that keeps maneuvering in space?
David, I'm not going to speculate, but I can tell you what it isn't. It's not a piece of debris.
The plan released today stops short of what President Trump wants, which is an entirely new military service devoted to space. A plan to do that will be submitted to Congress next year. Jeff?
Hunter-killer satellites certainly sounds pretty alarming.
Photographing planets up close and discovering things about our universe. People search for objective evidence to prove the validity of their claims. People search for evidence to prove that the photos of planets are in fact real, or proof that they really went to the moon.
This proof is not easy to find, and they may or may not have done many of the things they claim to do. However, understanding NASA's connection to high-level occultists, the military-industrial complex, and apparently the structure of power that is tied to both those things, they might have a dark, esoteric reason for deceiving us about the nature of space and reality. Today, NASA advances the agenda of geoengineering and may be involved with it more than we know. Geoengineering, spraying the skies with metals to alter the weather, actually finds origin in the same academic and military institutions that NASA came from. MIT, Lawrence Livermore Labs, and other institutions made geoengineering the nightmare of unexplainably hazy skies it is today. NASA pulled the move to normalize geoengineering in the public eye in 2017 when they sprayed the skies off the coast of Maryland with toxic barium and strontium in an alleged test. The metals were brightly colored, and the mainstream media told the public to watch for the colorful toxic skies as if it were some natural beauty. You can see how this works. NASA plays its role for the cult. The mainstream media backs up NASA for the cult, telling people to look up at the toxic sky and marvel at its beauty. The full scope of NASA's role and what we could call the cult of Western power takes longer to explain.
Both their official insignia and their official seal. You'll see that the most prominent object in the seal is a red swooshing object. They call that the chevron or the vector. If you ask NASA's Public Affairs Office, this symbology is featured so heavily in their insignia and seal, they'll give you what really amounts to the standard facile cover story for the unilluminated. They'll tell you that is a representation of a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s, which was the time the logo was created. Not exactly the case. Someone might want to ask the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos, that was formed in 1992, why they chose that same logo. And while you're at it, you can go ask the Chinese, who formed their space agency in 1996, why in the world they're using a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s as their official logo. Then you can ask the Japanese, the South Koreans, Taiwanese, Malaysia, Mexico, Iran, all of these countries, even Bulgaria. They all utilize the vector symbology in their space agency logos for their national space agencies. It gets even deeper. You can go look at the individual manned program patches for NASA. The Mercury program, for example, a blatant use of covert symbology. In every logo dealing with the Mercury program, you'll see what looks like a number 7 in their logo. And again, NASA's official story is that they put this number 7 there so that they could pay homage to the original 7 Mercury astronauts, kind of forgetting the fact that only 6 Mercury astronauts actually flew into space, because number 7 never did. Deke Slayton had a heart problem, so he didn't get to go up. So there were only 6 Mercury astronauts, yet there's a 7 in every single logo. That's in the official mission or official program insignia for Mercury, as well as the 6 individual mission patches carry this logo.